femboy Alasdair here. I wanted to read to you guys tonight for a little bedtime story, and I thought I would read for the first time out loud the novel Poor Things by Alasdair Gray. So let's get started with chapter 1. Making me. Like most farm workers in those days, my mother distrusted banks. When death drew near, she told me her life savings were in a tin trunk under the bed and muttered, "Take it and count it." I did, and the sum was more than I had expected, she said. "Make something of yourself with it." I told her I would make myself a doctor, and her mouth twisted in the skeptical grimace she made at all queer suggestions. A moment later, she whispered fiercely, "Don't pay a penny toward the burial. If Scraffles puts me in a pauper's grave, then hell mend him. Promise you'll keep all my money to yourself." Scraffles was the local nickname for my father, and for a disease that afflicts badly fed poultry. Scraffles did pay for her burial, but told me, "I leave the stone to you." 12 years passed before I could afford a proper monument, and by then, nobody remembered the position of the grave. At university, my clothes and manners announced my farm servant origins, and as I would let nobody sneer at me on that account, I was actually alone outside the lecture theaters and examination hall. At the end of the first term, a professor called me to his room and said, "Mr. McCandless, in a just world, I could predict a brilliant future for you, but not in this one unless you make some changes. You may become a greater surgeon than Hunter, a finer obstetrician than Simpson, a better healer than Lister, but unless you acquire a touch of smooth lordliness or easygoing humor, no patient will trust you. Other doctors will shun you. Don't scorn a polite appearance, because many fools, snobs, and scoundrels have that. If you cannot afford a good coat from a good tailor, search for one that fits for you among forfeited pledges in the better pawn shops. Sleep with your trousers neatly folded between two boards under your mattress. If you cannot change your linen every day, at least contrive to attach a freshly starched collar to your shirt. Attend conversations and smoking concerts arranged by the class you are studying to join. You will not find us a bad set of people, and will gradually fit in by a process of instinctive imitation. I told him my money could pay for no more than my fees, books, instruments, and keep. "I knew that was your trouble," cried he triumphantly, "but our Senate handles bequests for deserving cases like yours. Most of the grants go to divinity students, but why should science be excluded? I think we can arrange to give you at least the price of a new suit. If you approach us in the right way and I put in a word, what do you say? Shall we attempt it?" Had he said, "I think you are entitled to a bursary. This is how to apply, and I will be your referee." Had he said that, I could have thanked him. But he lolled back in his chair, hands clasped on bulging waistcoat, simpering up at me, for I had not been invited to sit, with such a sweet, coy smug that I pocketed my fists to avoid punching. His teeth Instead, I told him I came from a part of Galloway where folk disliked begging for charity, but since he had a high opinion of my talents, we could arrange to profit us both. I suggested he lend me £100, for which I could repay 7.5% on the anniversary of the loan until my 5th year as general practitioner or 3rd as professional consultant, when I would refund the original loan and add a £20 bonus. He gasped, so I added swiftly, "Of course I will be bankrupt. If I fail to graduate or get struck early off the register, but I think I am a safe investment. What do you think? Shall we try it?" "You are joking," he murmured, staring at me hard, his lips twitching with the beginnings of a smile he wanted me to imitate. Being too angry to grin at the joke, I shrugged, said goodbye, and left. There was perhaps a connection between this interview and an envelope addressed in an unknown hand which came through the post a week later. It contained a £5 banknote, most of which I spent on a second-hand microscope, the rest on shirts and collars. I could now dress like a plowman and more. I could now dress less like a plowman and more like an indignant bookseller. My fellow students thought this an improvement, for they started greeting me cheerily and telling me the current gossip, though I had no news for them. Godwin Baxter was the only one I talked with as an equal, because I still believe we were the two most intelligent and least social people attached to the Glasgow Medical Facility. So that was the end of chapter 1. And I think that we could get started on chapter 2. And there's a little illustration of Godwin. Chapter 2, Making Godwin Baxter. I knew him by sight for 3 terms before we exchanged a word. A private workspace had been made in a corner of the dissecting room by taking a door off a cupboard and installing a bench. Baxter usually sat there, preparing and examining slide sections and making rapid notes. And here, his big face, stout body, and thick limbs gave him a dwarfish look. Sometimes he ran out to raid the tank of disinfectant, where brains were heaped like cauliflowers, and as he passed other people, you saw he was a whole head, being desperately shy. Despite the ogreish body, he had the wide, hopeful eyes, snub nose, and mournful mouth of an anxious infant, with a brow corrugated by 3 deep, permanent wrinkles. In the morning, his coarse brown hair was oiled and combed flat on each side of a center parting, but as the day wore on, spiky tufts of it rose behind his ears, and by mid-afternoon, his scalp was as shaggy as a bear's pelt. His clothes were of expensive gray cloth, quietly fashionable and beautifully tailored, to make his odd figure appear as conventional as possible, yet I felt he would look more natural in the baggy pants and turban of a pantomime Turk. Alright, so that was part 1 of reading Poor Things to You for sleep tonight. So, I'll be back in the next part with the rest of chapter 2. Thank you so much. I'm Mark Alasdair.